Chapter 15, Senate Testimony. Can the California Department of Corrections police itself? The answer, I believe, is no. But starting today, it must. California's prison system teeters on the brink of being declared bankrupt, not only in its policy, but in its morality, starting with top prison brass. It is one judge's order away from being pulled into receivership and run by a federal court. It is a tarnished institution. The California Department of Corrections has lost its ability and integrity to police itself. Structural reform from the top to the bottom is mandated, but even the best of reforms can be merely relegated to paper. It's the people and their elected or appointed leaders who give meaning and realization to the value of the piece of paper on which any policy is written. We don't just need a review and overhaul of the policy. We need a review and overhaul of the people who are charged with running one of the nation's largest prison systems. If top officials neither understand nor care about the need for fair investigations, they are unlikely to investigate thoroughly and without prejudice or to impose discipline when things go wrong. California's prison dictatorate has far too often chosen to look the other way in dealing with problems to officer misconduct and investigative services. We have seen them shut down investigations, including submitting false documents to a court. There are systematic problems in the CDC that top brass have not only ignored, but become accomplices to sanctioning a code of silence at the highest level of government. And now, California's top brass are facing possible charges of contempt of court and perjury. This is an outrage. This was Senator Gloria Romero's opening statement before my testimony during the Senate Select Committee on Government Oversight on January 20th, 2004. Senator Jackie Spears' opening statement was just as powerful. Today's hearing is the fourth in a series of hearings that the Select Committee on Government Oversight and the Select Committee on the California Correctional System have had over the course of 2 years and 2 administrations. Last year, during the course of our hearings, there was a statement only by a man that goes like this: "No 2 women are going to tell me how to run the prisons." Now, Mr. Almeida, Senator Romero and I don't want to be wardens. We just want justice done. We want the men and women who run the nation's largest correctional system to honor the public trust that has been placed in their hands. Senator Spear continued, "Much of the testimony we will hear today will be startling and even unbelievable. Whistleblowers who speak under oath fear for their jobs and their lives." Our next topic is Salinas Valley State Prison and the Green Wall. We're going to hear now from Correctional Officer Donald Vodka. "Come on," said Lanny, "we're up." During the testimony, I gave precise details about the Green Wall and how the warden's office had intentionally leaked my confidential report to other staff members. Senator Romero then stated, "You indicated that you believe that the report, and then subsequent to that others were leaked because you began to get basically being ostracized by other officers, you began to get intimidated. At one point, I understand from your court brief that you were threatened, as well as yourself, and I believe your child." "That's a hard subject," I replied. "Thank you, Officer Vodka. I won't ask further. I do have it in writing, and I'll go ahead, and that will be part of the testimony overall," she said. "I can't answer that. Just give me a minute." Lanny put his hand on my shoulder and whispered in my ear, "Are you all right? You can stop if you want." I told him I would continue with the questions from Senator Romero. I pulled myself up to the microphone. "In July, I'm not going to tell you where I live because I still currently live in that area because I fear for my safety right now. And both senators, I'm wearing a protective bulletproof vest on me right now. I want to put that on the record. I was attending a fair and my little boy was with me. As I was leaving the fairgrounds, I was approached by a supervisor that I knew at the institution. As I was walking out, he yelled at me, 'Hey, Vodka.' I go, 'Hey, how are you doing?' I walked over to him, shook his hand. Right away, he stood up and says, 'Are you suing so-and-so?' I said, 'I can't talk about it.' And he says, 'You need to back off.' And he started yelling, 'Back off. Let it go. He's a friend of mine.' My little boy got startled. He goes, 'Dad, what happened?' I didn't want to tell him. He's only 8 years old. He doesn't live in California. We both then walked immediately to my vehicle. I contacted my attorney immediately the next morning and followed up with several reports with no prevail. Senator Romero began, This will be an issue that certainly we're going to raise tomorrow in terms of when we do reports and we receive reports, who receives them? Should they remain under seal? Who should receive them? That will be subject to tomorrow's testimony. Mr. Rimmer, let me ask you some questions here. What steps are taken to protect an officer who has been asked, no, let me correct that, who has been directed, ordered by his superior to write a report on something like the green wall? The officer writes the report, submits it to his superiors. What is supposed to happen in terms of protection of that officer from any potential negative fallout, as has been described by Officer Vodka? Mr. Rimmer was seated to the right of me. He was the acting director of corrections at the time. The former director of corrections, Mr. Edward Almeida, had been relieved from his duties. Mr. Rimmer responded, well, it really depends on the specifics of the particular case, and each case is going to vary a little bit from. It could be anything as simple as keeping the information confidential with only restricted copies, restricted reading of whatever the information may be, up to including a security detail on that particular individual. It could include a change of job assignment. Senator Romero stated, well, he has changed. If we expect individuals to step forward to break the code of silence or the code of cowardice, do you think that we have sufficient protections and reassurances for officers today that when they step forward, that what occurred to Officer Vodka will not happen to them? Senator Romero was getting very upset. Mr. Rimmer was clearly trying to dance around the questions. He responded, I think we need to do something within the department to ensure that all staff is protected from any kind of work environment that even closely resembles this. It's applicable not only in the institution, but throughout the department and basically all of our facilities. And I think we have some work to do in that regard. Calmer now, Senator Romero said, I agree with you that we do have work to do. It sounds like from the description, from what I've read, he stepped forward, he did the right thing. He did what he was ordered to do. He followed his professional duties. He submitted his reports with the belief and the understanding that these would be confidential, that appropriate individuals would receive them. Nothing appeared to be done when it was learned that this material had been leaked or exposed to folks who were outside the chain. Yeah, I think we do have some work to do. And my hope would be that when we, as I heard Secretary Hickman express this morning, he does not condone the code of silence. He will be active against the code of silence. But as we do so, let it be understood that to do so, we're going to have to still probably provide some protections that right now are missing. Senator Spear began, let me ask you further, Mr. Rimmer. You know, to me, the worst thing that can happen to a correctional peace officer, one of the worst things that can happen, is to do what he's been asked to do or come forward with information as a whistleblower and then have others become aware of it and then have his reputation, credibility, safety compromised by comments made by other correctional officers that he's a snitch. What regulation, what protocol exists within the department to take adverse action against individuals who jeopardize the safety of individuals who come forward as whistleblowers? Rimmer looked dumbfounded. Well, I think in this particular instance, and maybe Mr. Hoshino can elaborate for me, there was action taken regarding some of the events that Mr. Vodka spoke to. Mr. Hoshino was in charge of all the Office of Investigation Services and answered to the Director of Corrections, who was Mr. Rimmer at the time. Senator Spear leaned as far as she could without leaving her chair, and she directed her question to Mr. Rimmer. She was going to give it to him now for pawning the question off to Mr. Hoshino. Well, you know, I think that's really a very good answer. Let's not talk about Mr. Vodka for a minute. I got the copy of the Inspector General's report, which doesn't say a whole lot. What do you normally do? If I come forward and give you information that is incriminating to another officer, but I'm a whistleblower, and that gets out on the yard and I'm called a snitch. That's like having, a red target placed on your head for inmates to come after you, and for other correctional officers not to support you, if there is, in fact, some scuffle. So, what do you do presently? Mr. Hoshino began, Senator, if I may. I know this is a sore subject for me to rise with folks, but this is a department-wide problem. This is a problem that we're trying to address. It has to do with confidentiality, protecting people's identity. It appears to me that Officer Vodka was directed to submit information, and that information went to an investigative unit. That investigative unit has certain responsibilities with that information, and they didn't take care of their responsibilities with that information. It's the same responsibilities that we're trying to take care of in OIS. In fact, it's not just those places, it's department-wide. There is too much information and too much identity about investigations and individuals who are stepping forward that are just getting out and getting around inappropriately, and it compromises the individuals and it compromises the investigations. Senator Spear stated, "You're stating the fact and evidence, but what are we doing about the Lieutenant Browns who make the statements? You're a snitch and jeopardize the safety of another officer. You're not going to stop this at all if the people who call the whistleblowers snitches aren't reprimanded." "I agree with that, Senator," said Mr. Shino. "But meanwhile, we have whistleblowers whose lives are being destroyed. So there is no policy about going after individuals who make statements about officers being snitches because they've gotten word that they are, in fact, whistleblowers." Mr. Oshino was crouching very low in his seat. "Not that I know of, and not that I have uncovered in the 90 days that I have been there. That, to me, is probably one of the most outrageous things we've heard today. Let me ask you this. Based on hearing Mr. Vodka's explanation of what happened, what should have happened, Mr. Rimmer?" Ms. Keishan, Department of Corrections senior legal staff, interrupted. "Excuse me, Senator. I hate to butt in. As the department's legal advisor, I have communicated the fact that this matter was going to be on calendar today to our litigation counsels at the Office of the Attorney General's office. They advised us not to communicate the particulars with respect to this case as it is an active litigation." Lanny became furious with this statement. He stood up from his chair. "Senators, I think that's the whole problem. This has been going on since 2001. We tried everything. We wrote to Almeida, Duncan, and the wardens. Help him out. Help him out. Do something for him. Nothing. We wrote to Gray Davis. Nothing. Have the IG take a look at it. Now, he walks around with a bulletproof vest. That can't be right, okay? An excuse of what's an active litigation, it should never get there. He's a state employee. He should never have been there." Next to Mr. Rimmer was Cheryl Plyer, second in charge of the Department of Corrections. Ms. Plyer stated to the senators, "Maybe I've been blessed in my career, but I have never heard of some of the stories like I have heard today that covers 13 different assignments. However, I will tell you that what I've learned today is not acceptable conduct by the Department of Corrections employees. There is a regulatory law currently in place that says you will respect your fellow employees. You will not be discourteous to fellow employees, and there's government code regulation as well." Senator Romero then asked Ms. Plyer, "What about you will not endanger your fellow employees?" Ms. Plyer leaned forward. "You will not speak about personal and confidential information regarding other employees." Senator Romero then asked her, "Are there disciplinary actions taken when that is reported?" "Absolutely," Ms. Plyer answered quickly. Romero then asked, "Why didn't it happen in this case?" Plyer, acting dumbfounded, stated, "I can't answer about this case. I don't know. I'm not up on the history with this particular case. But I have taken discipline myself on employees who became not to this level of treatment of other employees, but for discourteous treatment of other employees. I know we're in litigation, but we're not here to try the lawsuit. But again, too, I would agree with you. We shouldn't have to be here," said Senator Romero. Senator Romero continued, "The whole point is that if there was a procedure in place, if there were policies that were clear and understood, if there was training, and if there was the backbone and the willingness to speak out, it would seem to me that we wouldn't have to be sitting in a committee hearing being advised by our legal counsel. Don't talk about it. It's the subject of litigation. Money we're spending to resolve lawsuits that seem to me unnecessary could be going into training of officers and putting forth really what we should be doing in the Department of Corrections." Senator Spear turned towards me. "Mr. Vodka, thank you very much for your testimony here today. I have one last question. Do you want to return to work at the Department of Corrections?" I can't. It'll follow me wherever I go," I said. "That's what we've got to change in the department," said Senator Spear. At the conclusion of my testimony, I exited the Senate Capitol, where I was bombarded by the media. Lanny slipped his business card to the acting director of corrections, Richard Rimmer, and told him that I needed 24-hour protection. Rimmer assigned it to the Special Services Unit, who would look into the matter to see if it was valid for me to be protected after my testimony. Together, Lanny, Joe Reynoso, and I rushed to my car. I said goodbye to my friend Joe. Biggin, watch out for yourselves at all times. You did the right thing, and you will prevail. Call me every day so I know you're safe, Reynoso said. Lanny and I headed to Sacramento Airport, where I dropped him off. I'm proud of you, man. You did the right thing, and I am with you until the end. He then told me not to return to my residence, to get out of the state of California.